and can't wait to talk with Gracie, who I'm going to bring in right now and learn more about what she does. So hi, Gracie.
Hi, how's it going?
Going well. How are you doing?
Really great. Yeah. Erica was so cool. That was very cool to get to learn about what she does.
I mean, I have to say, out of the people that I've gotten to chat with over the festival so far, she's one of my favorites. In that, you get to just explore this whole new world, and it's someplace that so few people get to go. So it's really exciting to kind of dive with her. And so for you, I know that we're going to learn a little bit more about some great tech and engineering, and how you're using that to help save the planet. And I can't wait to learn a little bit more. Do you have a presentation that we want to bring up, so we can
Yeah.
not dive with you? We'll dive in, I guess. We'll keep the metaphor going here, as it's, we've got our underwater background, and I feel like learning all about engineering and
Yeah.
technology is all a little bit of a dive in. All right, so I've got that. It's coming up right now. Perfect. So we are diving in. I mean, we're gonna learn how to save whales with coding. So
Yeah.
so I will let you tell us all about how we can use codes, or coding, not codes, to save some of the biggest animals on the planet. So tiny little things working to save huge animals. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Gracie. And we'll be back with some questions. So if you have questions, feel free to add them into the comments, and we'll answer them when Gracie's wrapped up her presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Wes. Okay. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm so excited to get to talk to all of you today about what I do. So I am a software engineer, which is, yeah, someone who writes code. And code is how we write instructions that a computer can follow. So it wasn't super clear to me before I got this job, how coding related to saving the whales, for instance, or anything having to do with wildlife conservation. But since starting my job at a company called Vulcan in Seattle, Washington, which is where I am, I've learned all about how technology can be really useful in the world of wildlife conservation and can really support a lot of the amazing work that's already happening there. So I'm going to tell you about one of the projects that I've been lucky enough to work on, which has to do with killer whales, or orcas. They can be called either one of those things. But first, I wanted to kind of tell you about how I got to this job that I have today, how I found myself working in technology. Because had you talked to me when I was in middle school or high school, in any of these pictures here, I would not have believed you if you would have told me I would be a computer scientist or a software engineer today. So back when I was in high school and middle school, I really loved being in band. I played the saxophone for many, many years. I loved playing sports. I played a ton of different sports, was always on a different sports team. And I have 5 siblings, so family was and is a huge part of my life. And I loved a lot of other subjects in school, but technology was just not one of the things at all that I was interested in. I didn't really play very many video games. I'd never built a computer, or didn't really tinker with technology as a kid. I also didn't know anybody in my life. There were no adults in my life who worked in the field of technology. And it can be really hard to see yourself doing a job if you have no idea or no real context for what that job might look like. So I just never kind of considered that as an option for myself. But I did someday hope that I would have a job where I was helping people and solving big problems, and hopefully making a difference in the world, which I think is a goal that a lot of us have. Maybe you can relate to that goal as well. But I didn't know what that would look like. And that's, of course, okay to not know when you're in middle school or high school. You have a lot of time to figure that out. So after high school, I went to college at Western Washington University, and I was interested in maybe studying something science or math related, because I just had really, really great science and math teachers in high school who really inspired me to pursue those paths. And because of those interests, I was really encouraged to take a computer science class, which was where I learned to program or code. Programming and coding are used interchangeably, they mean the same thing. And so I learned how to code in this this computer science class. So I'd never written any code up until this point. I was 18, didn't know the first thing about coding, and I was terrified to take this class. I thought that I would either be really terrible at coding or that I would just hate it. And a lot of that was just because I didn't have those technology interests that I thought you had to have, to be good at anything technology related. I, again, didn't play video games. I had never built a computer, and I just really had a lot of ideas about who is good at coding and who's good at building technology. And turns out all those things don't matter really at all. You can have any number of interests and hobbies outside of technology and still be amazing at coding and at building technology. And all those different interests that you have kind of give you different perspective and different creative ways of thinking that make you better at problem solving and innovating. And so I didn't really take, the same path that a lot of my classmates were taking. For instance, in the summers during college, I was a camp counselor at this amazing camp called Camp Kirby. And I loved being a camp counselor. I loved spending the summer outside and getting to hang out with kids all the time and teaching them about nature. And that really gave me kind of a new appreciation for the amazing world that we live in, and gave me a new sense of sort of responsibility to protect the world and to do my part to make it, last forever. So for people at least. And so because of that experience, and I kept doing a lot of the other things I loved in college. I kept playing music, and kept, joining random clubs and stuff. And I made sure that my life wasn't just all about technology all the time, because I just really needed those other sort of sources of inspiration. And then at the end of college, I ended up getting a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in computer science, and kind of wanted to take all the things I had learned in college and during college, and get a job where I felt like I could apply all those things in cool ways and solve cool problems. So I ended up then going to Vulcan, where I still work now, and getting to work on really, really cool projects, combining, that love of nature that I have and my technology skills into in this amazing way. And so one of the projects that I want to tell you about has to do with killer whales and learning about their health and studying their health and how we use technology to help us study and learn more about their health. So to introduce this project, I want to first introduce you to Nugget, who she is a southern resident killer whale, which is one species of killer whale. And the southern residents live in the Pacific Northwest. So they're basically like right in my backyard, which also makes this project very, very cool to work on. And Nugget and her family, who these are their names, these are her daughters and her son and her grandson in this picture. And Nugget and her family, they are 5 of about only 74 southern resident killer whales that are left in the world. So it's a very, very small population. And obviously, we really want to see those numbers increase. And a lot of people in my area and even beyond just the Pacific Northwest care a lot about these animals. And they are working super, super hard to make sure that we protect them better and that we make sure people are doing the right things to not harm them in any way. And a lot of there's kind of there's a few different factors that contribute to why these animals are so endangered. And so the first one is that they only eat salmon, which is kind of unique amongst killer whales. Other killer whales will eat seals and penguins and all kinds of other creatures. But these ones, the southern residents, they only eat salmon. And so because of a lot of other factors, salmon populations are not as large as they used to be. And so it's harder and harder for these whales to find enough food to eat. And then one of the other factors is that these whales and all whales are really impacted by vessel and boat noise. So anything from a big ship to like a small boat that a family might be out in, all those boats are making a ton of noise, and that really causes a lot of stress to the whales, which can harm their health. And then it also just makes it hard for them to communicate. It kind of shrinks the areas that they're able to be in because they don't want to be near the boats. And so that can be really hard on them as well. And so something we can do as people, as individuals to help them is, if you ever want to go whale watching, instead of going on a boat to whale watch, you can do it from shore. There's a lot of really cool places you can still, have a pair of binoculars and see the whales out in the water. And then if you are ever out on a boat and you see any type of marine mammal out in the water, just stay very far away. It's tempting to want to go close and get a cool picture of them, but if we can just stay very, very far away from them, that helps them a lot. So Nugget and her family, we care a lot about them. A lot of people care a lot about them. And one of the groups that I've been lucky to get to work with, who has been doing work with this population for a long time, is Sea Life Response Rehabilitation and Research, also called SR3. And Dr. Holly Fernbach is one of the marine mammal researchers at SR3, and I've gotten to work with her a lot. She's an amazing scientist. And she and her team have been studying the whales and their health specifically for many years now by flying a drone, like you can see in these pictures. And they fly the drone out over the water where the orcas are. They take these amazing pictures of the whales from above. And from these pictures, they can basically do like a doctor checkup of the whales without disturbing them at all, right? Their boat is super far away from where the whales actually are, and the drone is high enough up that it's not disturbing the whales at all. And then just from these pictures, they can take specific measurements that gives them an estimate of how healthy each whale is. So it's this really, really cool technique that they use, and it gives us a ton of really important information about which whales maybe aren't doing so well. It can also tell us if any of the whales are pregnant, which is very exciting. And all that information can then be used to give to lawmakers to help us make better laws to protect the whales better. It can be shared with the community so that we all can learn more about the whales and have even more, responsibility to protect them. So it's really important information. And one of the biggest challenges with what Dr. Fernbach and her team, this process that they do to get this health information about the whales, is just that it takes a really long time to do these kinds of assessments. So usually Dr. Fernbach and her team, there's kind of a few months out of the year where the whales are really actively in one area near where Dr. Fernbach's office is. And so during those few months, usually it's like September and May. So during May, say, Dr. Fernbach and her team will go out and they'll basically fly the drone almost every day of that month, taking pictures, thousands of pictures of the whales. And then after that 1 month of flying, it takes about 4 months to process all of those pictures and actually get those health assessment numbers. And so this includes, they have to identify which whale is which in each picture. They have to figure out which pictures are the best, because whales, they're not posing for the pictures for us, right? So we have to find the ones where they're super flat so that the measurements can be very accurate all along the body, make sure they're not rolling or tilting forward or backwards, or that there's not like sprays of water in the way. And then they have to actually do these very tedious sort of measurements on each of those really good pictures that they find of each whale. So it takes a long time. And what my team and I have been working on, my team's pictured across the top here of this slide. What we've been working on is writing some code that will help them to do this a little bit faster. Because if we can save Dr. Fernbach and her team some time, that is just time that then they'll be able to spend doing even more of the amazing work that they already do. So this code that we're writing, we're using artificial intelligence, which is how we teach a computer to do something automatically for us. And we're teaching it to basically take in those drone photos, thousands of drone photos, and automatically do some parts of this health assessment process. And we also make sure that Dr. Fernbach and her team are very involved in this whole coding, the whole process of the code running, because we want them to make sure the computer's doing things correctly and that they're able to double check what the computer is telling them to make sure that it's accurate all along the way. And then in the end, we get the health assessments out of the code. And Dr. Fernbach and her team have been very involved. So they're, able to know that these are accurate health assessments, and we've saved them time. So it's been a really, really fun project to work on with my team. And to give you an idea of kind of what I've specifically been working on, I have been using artificial intelligence and coding to teach a computer to basically to recognize which whales are in each photo from the drone. So it's kind of like facial recognition, but for whales. And instead of using the whale's face to recognize who they are, we use what's called their saddle patch, which is this heart-shaped patch on their back here. And that patch is unique. The patterns on it are unique to each individual whale. So if you know each whale pretty well and you've seen a lot of pictures of them, like Dr. Fernbach has, she can tell who's who just by looking at that saddle patch, which is pretty cool. And so now I'm trying to teach a computer to do that so that it can kind of suggest who might be in each photo. And then Dr. Fernbach can more quickly go through and kind of select who is who after the computer's narrowed it down for her. So you all can be the marine mammal researchers now, and you can look at this picture on the left here with this blue box around it and decide who you think it might be in this picture. Is it blackberry, jade, slick, or calypso? And I'll just give you a minute to think about it by looking at those saddle patches. And also a note, these names that they have, I didn't just give them these fun names. They were actually given these names through a variety of different naming competitions and different community naming schemes. So they all have very fun names. In addition to their more scientific identification, J27 sort of numbers. So it is Calypso. If you guessed Calypso, you were correct. And so this has been a really fun project to get to work on and a problem to solve, to think about how can we get a computer to do this for us. So it's been a really, really cool project to get to work on. And yeah, really meaningful as well. And so I just kind of want to finish off by saying, by asking you this question, which is, what problem will you solve? So your ideas are just so valuable and your perspective is unique. No one else has the same way of thinking or the same, experiences that you have. And so that makes your ideas really unique. And the world really needs to hear what you have to say if we want to solve these big problems that we have in the world. And so as you work towards solving whatever problem it is that you want to solve, just remember that coding is really just a tool that you can kind of have in your tool belt, that might, prove to be very, very useful to you to learn along the way as you're on your way to change the world. So thank you so much for listening, and yeah, turn it back over to Wes.
No, thank you. Thank you for, sharing your work with us and talking about, your path to finding out that you were going to, work in conservation in a very unique way that even you didn't expect. So that's a great story, I think, for a lot of people to hear. So I actually have a question for you for the code, for the system that you created. How much time are you saving the team with the code that you created?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't officially delivered the tool to Dr. Fernbach and her team yet, but they've done some testing of it. And I think we are really hoping to save them maybe 50% of the time that they have to spend. So even if we could cut out, 2 months from that time that they spend, wow, that would be a huge win. So yeah,
I can't imagine what it's like to sit there and have to hand identify everything. So it's great that you're able to bring that. So we have a question from Bob over on Facebook asking, can you tell us a little bit more about the machine learning packages that you use? He mentions OpenCV, TensorFlow, others Python-based, which, sure, not a coder. So I think those are actual things that you might use. So I will, So Bob was curious about that.
Yeah, they totally are packages that I use. I use both of those. More so TensorFlow. I use some OpenCV for image sort of processing and manipulation stuff, but TensorFlow is my number one machine learning tool. Yeah.
So there you go. That's Gracie's machine learning package of choice.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Meha Kumar. Can the code that you've created be used for terrestrial species?
Yeah. So a lot of the techniques that we use can definitely be used for terrestrial species. One of the sort of first steps we have to do in our code is just figure out where in the picture the whales actually are. That's super easy for us as people in these pictures. At least we're like, okay, they're right there. But we have to get the code to figure out which parts of the picture actually have a whale in them.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes that can be like a much harder problem. I've worked on a project where we were studying African elephants, and the pictures we were taking were from an airplane instead of a drone. So the elephants were super, super tiny in those pictures. And so figuring out where they were was a much harder problem for people to do. And so the code was really helpful in that regard. So those kind of techniques we definitely use, across many different species.
Well, and that's good to know because it sounds like it's a tool that has a lot of uses and could do a lot of good. So I have a question about the coding because, as I mentioned just before, like I don't code. I've never learned that skill other than enough to be just enough dangerous on any website I might have to back end on. I've always been told it's like learning a language. So how would someone want, if they want to get into coding, what's a good way for them to take that first step?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think sometimes it's cool, or it's like a little bit more motivational if you have like a specific problem you want to solve with code. So maybe you have something in mind that you're like, oh, this seems like I could really, build some kind of computer program that would help me with this one annoying thing in my life or something. So maybe there's something like that. But also, if you're just interested in like learning more and figuring out what it's about, there's a lot of really good online resources. Like I know code.org. A lot of kids are using code.org in school already, which is awesome that's becoming just a thing that everyone's kind of learning these days. But yeah, there's so many online resources, and Python is the main language that I use, and it's a really, really good beginner language for sure. So
what makes it a good beginner language? Just, I'm going to fully nerd out here because I find this so interesting. Like I work in immersive in VR, so that's a whole different language. So I'm always curious, like, what does that mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So it's great because it's pretty close to English. Like there's not a lot of like fancy sort of, weird things you have to learn. It's a lot like writing English sentences. You have to learn like which words are the important words that you have to like write to make things happen. But, it's a lot more human readable than some other coding languages. So.
Well, that makes sense. That's a good one to start with because I feel like thinking about it, it's a little overwhelming to think about, learning this whole system to build things. Like it feels kind of like, way out of my league. So it's good to know that it's something that maybe is actually more accessible than we think.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I was so surprised to learn, it's totally not as scary as I thought. I worried it might be when I was learning. Yeah.
Well, and that's great to know. That's just really great to know, I think, for everyone here. So, if there's something that you want to try, there's good ways to, baby steps to learn and, take those first steps. But unless you actually reach out and try and learn something, you're never going to know if you can do it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that, that was easy to do for you, or not easy, but like to make the first step and jump in. I have one last question. So what is the next animal, or if you could work to help conserve any animal, what would it be?
Yeah. So I have a project that's kind of still spinning up at the moment, but it's related to bottlenose dolphins.
Oh.
So that one's exciting, and we're going to be using sound to study them instead of pictures this time. So because they have a ton of different whistles and clicks and things that they make. So that will be a pretty exciting project. And I think if I could help any animal, I really love beluga whales. So I'm hoping sometime I'll get to work on a project with belugas. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Well, and they have really unique like songs, and like it's almost a language, right?
Yeah. From what I know, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Well, so I guess that's the great thing for this too, and for you is that you aren't a biologist. You're creating these great code and then get to learn more about animals. So it sounds like if you find something that you love, you can also integrate it into other things that you love.
Yeah, I always say that too. That's like the coolest thing about coding is instead of having to like pick one field that you want to work in, if you learn how to code, you kind of open the door to working in any field because we're all just using more technology every day. Like healthcare needs people who know how to code, sports needs people who know how to code, like the government needs people who know how to code. So you can work anywhere really with these skills. So it's pretty
So
cool.
even out in the jungles or underwater, it sounds like
Yeah.
coding it can take you anywhere. So that's a really great insight to think about when people are thinking about what is it I want to do, what do I want to become, or what do I want to work in. So really great advice, and want to thank you again for joining us here at Women Blaze Trails. It was really wonderful to meet you and to learn about what you're doing and the cool things that you're creating to save orcas.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad I could be part of this awesome event.
Thank you again, and have a good rest of the weekend.